let's get into the first term and dissect it accordingly. And let's begin with the opening bounce. Now, what did we make of that moment? It was a bit anticlimactic, wasn't it? It's so tough, isn't it? Because the tradition states that we have the bounce, but when that happens, it really takes the air out of your sails.
I would assume that whoever bounced the ball was the best bouncer of the 4 chosen for the grand final. So the question becomes, you always think, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like when we talk about the bounce, like the worst thing that, if we have to do we want that? Do we want to risk that as opposed to just throw it up?
Yeah.
I've always liked the bounce, at least to start the game. Yet that's when, and then throw it up the rest of the game. But come grand final day, we can't have that, can we?
It's tough. It's nerve-wracking for the umpire.
What do you think? I know. And I feel for him because it's a bloody tough ask.
Just in an ideal world, they'd bounce it and it would be a good bounce and we wouldn't be talking about this.
That's right, but we can't.
Yeah, I don't like the way that the time comes off the clock when they do a bad bounce. I think they should reset the time because you might say it's only 2 or 3 seconds, but if there's 3 or 4 of them a game in a tight match, I'd be resetting the clock.
And the question is, I would ask in favour of the umpires, like Ray Chamberlain, who is a very good decision maker, wasn't able to umpire in the finals because of that. Therefore, should we just make it easier for the umpires? Because I imagine there's a level of stress and anxiety that comes with bouncing the ball. Is the bounce so valuable that we need to keep it as opposed to just throw it up, get on with it? What do you think?
This might be Andrew Dillon's biggest legacy because it is going to be a talking point for umpires in the game moving forward. But speaking of the game, the first goal was always going to be a big moment, whether it was Brisbane or Collingwood, and it was Collingwood's most effervescent, most dangerous young player, Nick Dacos. And it was a free kick that was given, and I thought that there was some free kicks given exactly like that and some free kicks missed. It's a really grey area when the player either shrugs or ducks his head for too high.
So for me, Zorko went to ground, ducked, and didn't get a free kick, which I was happy with. But then there was one, can't recall, a Collingwood player very similar shortly after that did a similar thing, yet was given a free kick.
Mason Cox did it on the wing.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with that one.
Yep.
I thought Nick's was probably there. It's really tough for umpires because we know what players are trying to do.
Yeah.
They go low very quickly and they'll lift their arm to try and slide the tackle high.
I'll tell you what, though, I think the moment of the first term was reserved, I should say, for Zach Bailey. Wasn't this absolutely sensational?
Goal of the year?
Well,
it's up there.
Oh, no, if it's around
23. It's up there.
Is it better than Will Ashcroft, which was his teammate who got given the goal of the year? Regardless, it was an amazing moment, and he kicked 2 in the first quarter, Zach Bailey. And he looked right on the edge of taking the game. Yeah, he did.
Kicking 5 or 6, didn't he? And Charlie did at different times as well, which is a measure of how well Collingwood did to contain them in a sense.
Yeah, I looked at the first 6 minutes of the game and Brisbane had 0 inside 50s for the first 6 minutes. I thought, geez, this is all Collingwood.
19-7 first quarter.
Yeah, was it 19-7, was it? But then the strength of the Lions is they don't need many opportunities, do they?
They kicked 3 goals from 7 entries.
Yeah.
They were efficient.
So Lincoln McCarthy kicked another one as well. I think the Nathan Murphy head knock was a big moment as well, Sarah.
It was massive, and I think it was a bit confusing as well because at quarter time he kind of came out to the huddle and he was talking to teammates and it looked like that he was right to go, but in the end he was ruled out.
He ruled himself out because even though he passed the test, which he now believes that he's memorised the test.
Yeah, that's a problem.
He knew that he couldn't see Craig McRae clearly at quarter time. His vision was a bit dazed, so he ruled himself out.
And he's had a fair few concussions now.
Yeah, he's had quite a few. Yeah, early this season as well, at least a couple. So that takes a lot of maturity to do that, given it's a grand final, but he knew that he wasn't 100% when he went for a run after quarter time.
So Patrick Lipinski comes on as the sub, and I thought he handled himself very well because he was demoted from the starting side, but he came on and had his impact and played his role as well. I'll tell you what, there were just goals everywhere. We saw that Myercheck goal early on.
Can we talk about Degoe's goal after the quarter time siren?
Well, this was a big moment. As you said, clutch Collingwood, and that was one of those moments.
Well, it was one of those moments as they were behind before, they were just in front before the kick, but it just took that out that bit further. And they just settled better, didn't they, Collingwood? I thought the first 2 centre clearances, I reckon Brisbane had first possession, yet there was a fumble and Dunkley might have slipped over, ball spills, and Collingwood owned field position on the back of that. That's why they had the 19 inside 50s to 7. You're right, they were lucky that they're so so dangerous up forward that just from 7 entries, that was 3 goals for the Lions. Because I think most other teams, 7 entries, they might net 1 goal from it. So it was that front half that were able to keep it in it early, but certainly they settled well, the Pies.
So then the Lions came out in the second quarter and kicked the first 2. The first was Charlie Cameron, who looked so energetic.
Well, do you know what was funny? Charlie Cameron hadn't touched the ball, and then at quarter time, the Lions fans started singing Country Road.
Yeah.
And it ignited Charlie. He just needed his theme song to get going.
It was awesome, wasn't it? And that theme song, it blared everywhere.
It did.
Charlie Cameron was always going to be dangerous at some point. He just had to make the most of his chances, and he did early. And then McCluggage kicked his, Bobby Hill kicked his second. But I loved Lincoln McCarthy's. Kicking them, they were nailing them from everywhere at that point. And the game was going back and forth. And in the end, in the second quarter, there was 11 goals. It was the best quarter of football I've ever witnessed live.
It was just running absolutely hot, wasn't it? There were goals coming from absolutely everywhere, and you were thinking, this might be the highest scoring grand final we've seen at some time. It didn't kind of go that way in the second half. Maybe the heat played a bit of a factor there. But what did you make of that second term? Because once again, Collingwood, just towards the end, they steadied, didn't they?
They did. It was such a dynamic quarter that it was impossible for them to keep that going. And you're right, a little bit of heat, but also players start to tighten up. You know, we get closer to the end, your decision-making, your ball use, you're less aggressive. But the Pies, that's right. I mean, it was really the speed of both teams' forward half was the area that was able to trouble one another. If we looked at the second quarter, you had Hill, McCarthy heavily involved. Zach Bailey, although not scoring, kicked 2 in the first. And then you had Hill, Jamie Elliott, also McCreary. So leg speed in the front half was so pivotal in this game because aside from Joe, no tall forward had any impact in the game.
Yeah, I love that.
And isn't it interesting? We always talk about the need to have big key forwards win your big finals in September, when really, if you looked at yesterday's game, it was fleet of foot and the ground level players in the front half that just tore it apart for both teams. I mean, the Norm Smith medalist, how often would you nominate going in a forward pocket, an opportunistic type player with really good leg speed in the biggest game of the year, setting it on fire? But he was simply outstanding.
Well, Bobby Hill's moment was clearly the specky, but it was set up by a kick from Braden Maynard inboard to Jeremy Howe, a risky kick over the top to Bobby Hill, who took one of the great grand final marks. And I think Bobby Hill kicking 4 first half goals probably elevates him to a play that we never thought possible. He never kicked 3 goals in a game before, Sarah.
Yeah, that is
incredible. He kicked 4 and a half in
Yeah.
a grand final.
And he dished a few off. I think he had 18 disposals and 9 score involvements. So every second disposal led to a score. So everything he touched really yesterday turned to goal and gold, I should say, or goal
Yeah,
as
both
well.
actually. Yeah.
And when you think about his story, Bobby Hill, you know, he came from the Giants. He previously tried to get away to Essendon. He overcame testicular cancer. He comes into Craig McRae's side and pretty much immediately squeezes out Jack Ginnivan, who had to work his way back into the side and eventually did towards the end of the year. But to stand up like that in the biggest game of your career, it says something about what he's made of, doesn't it, Scotty?
Oh, it does. The pressure's at its greatest, and he was able to stand up in a position that's really challenging. Like that forward pocket roll, apply pressure, lay tackles, hope that you can get on the end of 1 or 2. But to kick 4 like that in the first half, when the game was at its hottest, was outstanding. And he's been an incredibly good pickup by Collingwood to identify that type of play, particularly when you had Ginnivan and Elliott there already. But he squeezed Ginnivan out of that, and Ginnivan came into the side, provided a little bit of impact at different times, but it was all about Hill and to a lesser extent Elliott.
I love Speckies all the time, but Speckies on grand final day are just that extra bit special. And it gave Bobby Hill his 4th goal for the half. And what was the score at half? Well, it was 5-5 to 6-3 in that second quarter.
At halftime, 9-9 to 9-3.
Yeah, incredible. And the talk in the media box was that the best half of football
It's up there.
we've seen since the second half of the 89 grand final? And I can't comment on that because
Neither can I.
-2.
You can, Scotty.
But I think the way the game is played now, to have it so open, what makes it so special.
If it's a handicap, you're right, because it's a handicap event and free-flowing football was more of a thing back then. Now, I would say that second quarter is as good a quarter as played in a grand final. I mean, back in 89, as a Geelong supporter, there was a mid-year game against Geelong v Hawthorn at Princes Park, and it was about 25 goals apiece at the end. Geelong were about 7, 8, 9 goals up.
Yeah.
So that could happen back then because it was much more open. But in terms of where the game's at now, the second quarter was simply outstanding.
And
11 goals.
It couldn't stay like that, so that Sarah.
It was 11 goals.
It had to slow down, didn't it?
And it did in that third term.
That's right, it had to. You couldn't play at that sort of breakneck speed under those conditions, weather, and that intensity, a grand final for 4 quarters.
So it was a bit of a tussle early, wasn't it, in the third term? A little bit of a
It tightened up.
stalemate.
Yeah, it became a game of chess.
Yeah.
No one wanted to give anything away. It just was a real arm wrestle in that third quarter.
And I thought the Collingwood chant was premature about 10 minutes into the third quarter, given the Pies hadn't kicked a goal. And then McCluggage kicked the goal. And I felt like that was the moment where the Lions were going to kick away.
Quarter time, he had just the one disposal. And in the end, what did he finish with here? I'm just having a look. 21 and 2. That's a pretty good performance in a grand final, Scotty.
Yeah, he had a very good game. Slow start. There's a lot of the mids, and we spoke about it. Like Collingwood controlled the game early. Absolutely. 2 goals, Zach Bailey, Link McCarthy goal in that first quarter kept him in it in many ways, 8 scoring shots to 3. So he wasn't the only one. I thought Lachie Neale was very slow to get started in this game and never really got going apart from a brief period in the third quarter. I thought he had some impact on the game. But McCluggage just built from that quarter and was a very, very, very good player from then on to kick 2 goals and just his class, because I thought a lot of the time, if we were to say, well, what hurt the Lions? Their ball use.
Yeah.
Gave it back a lot.
Yeah. And
gave it back a lot.
And there were some really clear missed chances from the Pies as well in this third quarter when they'd been so accurate in the first half. And same with the Lions. And for whatever reason,
was it 1 goal 6 for the Pies in the
1-6.
third term? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And the game was on a knife's edge. And at some moments you thought both teams were going to kick away, and neither could.
And then Scott Pendlebury to have the composure to go back. I mean, the storylines around him and Steel Sidebottom, the lone survivors from that 2010 flag 13 years ago, they both had their moments. Pendles maybe took a little bit of time to get into the game, but I thought in that second half, really instrumental. And I tell you what, they don't look like they're slowing down either player.
No. Well, the toughest game of the year is the grand final, and they're at their oldest for obvious reasons, but they were both brilliant. Only one player has had a bigger gap between premierships.
Really?
And that's Joel Selwood.
Is that right?
His was 15 years between 09 and last year. Geelong went in 09?
Yeah, they won 2011.
So they were 13. And they're...
No,
I think
this is a bigger gap.
No, this is a bigger gap.
This is a bigger gap.
a bigger gap.
13.
So
I think the graphic was wrong.
Pendles played his 383rd game yesterday, which equals Robert Harvey, who's been a big mentor for him at Collingwood as an assistant coach. And it was interesting to listen to Craig McRae after the game say that Pendlebury got a PB for 3 different areas in the gym this week.
That's insane.
At the age of, what is he, 35 or 36?
He's 35.
Absolutely incredible that he's still playing the way he is. And it shouldn't be surprising that as the game opens up, he gets better. Probably when it's at its hottest, it's a bit harder for him, but when it opens up and the clutch moments come, it's better. And he's on a podcast, the Jock and Journo podcast with Jay Clark. And a few weeks ago, he was talking about how set shot kicking is his kryptonite. It's the one thing that he is probably not elite at compared to everything else. So to nail it in that moment, 27 minutes into the third quarter was a huge moment. It was the only goal the Pies kicked for that quarter, but it was an absolutely crucial one.
Absolutely crucial indeed. What did you say he's on? 383 games?
Yeah.
So he's going to get to 400 comfortably. I guess the next question is, how far does he go?
Well, is he slowing down at all? He's probably 5% slower than what he was, but he's still easily good enough to be in the team. And as long as he remains...
I think his first half of the year was stronger than his second half.
Yeah.
But you look at yesterday and go, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. Look, if he tailed off and it was the year, but he had such a good performance yesterday that you'd feel comfortable about him playing an important role next year.
Sarah, it's been said so many times before, but his ability to look like the game is in slow motion around him when everyone else is frantic is just incredible. And it was the same yesterday. The game was frantic and he just stopped and found space and hit targets.
So at the final change, it was the Pies 10-15-75, just leading the Lions 11-5-71. And we start the fourth term, and there is this massive collision between Charlie Cameron and Jeremy Howe. Well, Charlie Cameron kind of cleans him up. And in the end, it's revealed that Jeremy Howe's got 3 broken ribs. It's been a pretty tough year for him.
It has been a tough year, and this was a moment where I think the Pies got it down the field for a kick, and it really hurt Jeremy Howe. And I was watching him closely, Sarah. The medicos came out to him, and he told them to go away. I think he knew that if he went off the ground, he wasn't going to come back on, and he stayed on the field. And that just shows the toughness that he has at the age of 34 to remain on the ground, given that would really hurt Scotty, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And it also, if you were to be critical of the Lions, that 50-metre penalty from Charlie, and then I think Berry conceded 2.
Oh, yeah.
And the Berry one led to the steal goal. So you just look at that in a game where field position, it's always critical, but never more in that game because Collingwood were controlling it. To give up 350s throughout the game, 150 metres of field position really hurt the Lions. In a game of inches and in a game of split-second decisions.
That's what hurt Melbourne against Carlton as well, in a really tight match. I was also critical. I think Jared Lyons came on too late. I felt Brisbane were fading. I'm not saying that it was the difference in the match, but I would have brought him on at three-quarter time.
On hindsight, and that's all you've got to go on, you make a good point because he was really clean, wasn't he? He had an impact of 2 or 3 stoppages and he led to that last goal with quick hands over the top.
Which led to Joe Danaher's goal.
It's always a balancing act when you want to inject that player in, though, isn't it?
We learnt early in the week that Billy Frampton would come in for his first ever final. It was an intriguing battle with Harris Andrews, the Brisbane co-captain. I think Harris got on top in the last term. He had some really big moments. What did you make of that battle? Because on the stat sheet, Billy hasn't done all that much, Scotty, but his role was to negate Harris Andrews.
Billy's role is a big tick. He did nothing. He didn't have to. But if we look at...
He did nothing.
He literally did nothing.
He got 2 touches.
And he had a couple of half chances at the start, I think, of the third quarter, and he just fluffed them. And that's, sometimes that's because his headspace is not in attacking receive, it's in negating Wes Harris. So sometimes you just get caught up in it. But he did an excellent job on Harris Andrews. We saw how impactful Harris has been throughout the finals, particularly against Carlton. They couldn't get it past him. So that was really strong coaching because what they did, they brought in a like for a like, but they played the like in such a different way than McStay would have played. If he was in the team, McStay wasn't playing that role. So it was great coaching by McRae and great discipline from Frampton to play that role because you can go in the forward line and say, I'm playing on Harris Andrews, but I'm actually going to see if I can kick a goal or 2. And when you try and get those goal or 2, you allow Harris to lay off and take 8 intercept marks. But he stuck to his role incredibly well and made it harder for the Lions because Harris was tied up with him. You're spot on, Sarah. We just saw Harris get going late and help his team. But overall, Frampton did an excellent job.
So the Brisbane Lions are ahead with a few minutes to go in a grand final, and Collingwood change mode, Sarah, and they need a match winner. They need someone to step up.
You cannot overstate how big this was because previously Charlie Cameron, he looked to have secured Brisbane's flag when he snapped that goal. I think there were about 4.5 minutes or so of play. And Nick Dacos actually had kind of missed a tackle in that forward 50 play. And he said to himself, I've got to get one back for us here. And how about it? The next centre bounce, he has this incredible handball over to Jordan De Goey. And the Pies are back in front, which would have been so deflating for the Lions who had worked so hard to get their noses in front. And then Jordan De Goey, I mean, he didn't have his biggest game by any stretch of the imagination, but he had some big moments.
And as we said, I spoke in my snap about his clutch goal on quarter time. It's no more clutch than that. So you can give him 2 clutch goals. And if you look at it from a list management point of view, Collingwood and centre bounce, how pivotal there were so many critical centre bounces that Collingwood won yesterday. And Dacos's role, his handball, it's one of the best handballs you'll ever see. It was so quick. He got the ball out to De Goey into space before he hit the ground. And they identified Tom Mitchell. He played a significant role yesterday, I thought. And I've been critical at different times about the way that he does play, but I thought he was really impactful and they addressed those centre clearances and clearances in general with him coming into the team. And it took, they franked that decision on the last Saturday in September.
And this was a huge moment in the final term. It all revolved around another Pies veteran in Steele Sidebottom.
And that was the moment that he'll be remembered for in this grand final. His iconic moment is a goal from 55 when his team needed it most.
You know what? On my notes, though, when Charlie gave away the 50 it was still side bottom as the winger pushing back, and he was clutching the goal square. If you go back, he just took it cleanly.
Yes,
the ball
he
was
did.
bobbling around. He got
Below
it.
his knees.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's still side bottom, isn't it? All the things they don't make the stat sheet, or they're not flashy that he does. And that's why that goal was so good, because it was clutch and it had a bit of sizzle to it.
So that put the Pies 10 points up. Joe Danaher then snapped a goal with 93 seconds left to make it a 4-point ball game. In the end, that was ultimately the result. But it wasn't without the last minute a fair bit of controversy, Tom.
Controversy based on an advantage call that was given to the Brisbane Lions in a bid to allow them to kick a goal to potentially go 2 points up. Lachie Neale was legged. The whistle went. Brisbane took the advantage, presumably without hearing the whistle. And
They didn't, yeah.
but the advantage rule is very, very clear. It's a player-driven thing.
But they didn't really, to me, they didn't take the advantage because the ball was so hot that they couldn't actually stop, or they would have got
Let me ask you this.
poleaxed.
I think might be a controversial view, but the umpire had to give the advantage.
No, he didn't.
Because if that's marked by a Brisbane player 30 metres out from goal, you can't then bring it back.
But
the ball goes 30 metres up in the air and 30 metres
But
forward.
before then, they should have pulled it back, because when the ball bobbled over to Zach Bailey, who was surrounded by two. It's
Yeah.
like the umpire, to me, the umpire needed to know that there's no advantage here unless
Yeah.
Zach Bailey does
But
something.
it's not. So the law is wrong. It's not. I think football is the only sport in the world where we give an advantage after a whistle.
So if that happened 10 times again, how many times do you think the umpire would bring it back on what you've viewed this year?
I don't. I think they'd rarely bring it back.
Really?
Yeah.
I think they always bring it back.
Yeah.
I've seen umpires watch the play out and then always
That's the
bring it
common
back.
sense decision. You're right. Away from the laws of the game and the textbook, the
They
common
always
sense
do the
decision
common
is bring
sense.
it back.
Yeah. The umpire gives him a second or two. He goes, no, that's ridiculous. I'll bring it back.
Yeah, it was a big moment in the game. And I'm not saying it cost Brisbane
No,
the match.
neither am I.
But I would like to know the official ruling from the AFL. All the people I've spoken to the last 24 hours just say that it's a player-driven thing and that they're going to tick it off.
To me, the players had no opportunity to take the advantage. They just played the ball out
Yeah,
because
okay.
there's so much happening. The ball's bobbling. If Zach Bailey stands still, he gets poleaxed.
Yeah,
so
that's
you've got
true.
to play it out with vigour and intensity and see what happens. You can't rely on.
And he might not know what the free kick's for in the
He'd
first
have no
place.
idea. He's not
Yeah.
watching. Yeah, because the free kick happened after he got rid of it. So Zach Bailey would be tracking the ball, making space, not watching the legs. Could have been anything, couldn't it? It could have been a throw, and it's their ball.
Could have been holding the ball.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could have been a throw, holding the ball, whatever you like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sarah, your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I don't like talking about umpiring decisions. And we've had this incredible grand final, which was decided by 4 points. I don't think the umpires really
I agree.
changed
Oh,
anything.
no. I certainly don't think that, but it is a significant decision that was made.